Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming to Coffee Talk. We really appreciate you all being here today, and we hope you enjoy our half an hour to 45 minutes together. I'm very, very excited for Coffee Talk. As you know, we started this, and it's been less than a year, and it's been really successful. And um, we could spend just a day on just an L visa, or we could just spend a day on the H-1B regulations, or we could spend just a day on any immigration policy. Coffee Talk is about, speaking clearly and bringing up some highlights so everyone can go on with their day with these thoughts in mind. Um, we do this every 8 to 10 weeks. We have next time, we're also going to be specific about U.S. consular processes and policies abroad. But this time, we're going to talk a little bit about what we think about the president-elect and what will happen with our current president with some of the immigration policies, specifically abroad with the visas and here with the H-1Bs. And we're very, very lucky because we have, like, of course, our Marcela Bermudez, who is an exceptional immigration partner for Greenspoon Martyr, and also Genevieve Douglas, who is an incredible Bloomberg Law reporter who knows immigration inside and out. And like, it's just the fact, ma'am. So we have a legal perspective and we have a reporter's perspective, both extraordinary panelists, both we are just honored to have today. So thank you very much. So let's start with, what do you think, Marcel, is going to happen um, once President-elect Biden gets sworn in January 20th?
Okay, so everyone is, welcome everyone, first of all, good morning. So everyone is definitely bracing themselves. They want to see changes. There's been, under the Trump administration, there's been sweeping changes in immigration. A lot of the travel bans, the health-related bans, the economy-driven bans. So I think one of the first things that we're looking at is, what is he going to do with the bans? It's one of the issues that has really affected our clients with regard to travel. Business and family. There isn't any, no one's left unscathed in regard to the bans. Everyone's affected in one way or another. So with regard to the bans, it's unintentionally, the bans have been a topic of conversation for our coffee talks. It wasn't imagined that way, but it just so happens to be such a big issue that affects our clients so deeply that we do touch upon it often. So let's clarify something on the bans. Some bans have end dates that when they came into fruition with the proclamations, they had end dates established. Others didn't. So one of the first ones is the Muslim ban. The Muslim ban, we do think he'll probably jump on that one first, because actually when we were prepping for this, Patsy and I were talking. I was like, why was it that it was passed again? And we know it's terrorist. We know what the reasoning was, but we've had it since 2017. Where the real harm or not. So I think he's going to act on that first. Then we're going to look at the COVID bans. One thing that's important to know with the COVID is there is no end date on them. There is no expiration. It's the way it was phrased is until the president decides otherwise. So Biden will, and he started already, to convene with his health officials to start getting information, because it has to be based on some kind of logic. So he would be listening to the health officials to determine what to be done with the COVID travel bans. As you know, we have COVID bans, but we also have exceptions. So it's not a blanket restriction. They are becoming harder to obtain just because of timeframes. Consulates are starting to close, having more intermittent services because of COVID in Europe. Numbers have spiked significantly. We just saw, I think yesterday was on there, a lot of other lockdowns coming, and it will affect the consulates. That's where they are. It will definitely affect them. So we're looking to see what happens with those bans. In terms of the labor market bans, they are set to sunset December 31st. When I say the labor market bans, we're talking about
Marcella,
the restrictions.
As to the COVID bans, it seems like Biden's taking a pretty serious view on COVID, right? So yes. I don't think they're going to go away. What do you think, and what do you think?
I don't think it's going to be. I've just been elected January 20th. They're gone. I think they will definitely, especially with numbers, it's going to have a direct correlation with COVID numbers.
Genevieve, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the bans from Schengen area and other country specific COVID concerns, I think we're really looking at like game time decisions. Unfortunately, I agree with Marcel. I don't think that they're automatically going to go away with a change in administration. That being said, I can't specifically recall, but what were the COVID specific bans under the 212F authority, national security or economic security? National security. Okay, because there is kind of a difference of opinion, I guess, on the use of 212F authority for some of the labor market bans, for instance, like you mentioned, where economic security is the authority under which the president has made those decisions. When it comes to the national security authority, that's likely to stick much more, as we saw with the litigation over the Muslim ban. So I definitely think that COVID is so ever changing, and as we're seeing a second surge, there could be certain bans kept in place, or and as you mentioned, with consulate action, they've been severely inhibited, I guess, and my understanding is that they're not processing a lot of requests. They're not processing a lot of visas.
Well, we've seen with those national interest exemptions, they delay it so often that some people miss that opportunity. So they have to do the 14 days outside.
Sure.
They go from responding right away to silence for weeks, and then they're back on. So is that an indication of COVID in their offices, or is that an indication of backlogs? We're hitting the holidays as well.
Right.
So it's a moving target. So Marcella, it's a practical matter. The national interest waivers are either delayed or are more cumbersome to obtain.
Yeah, there definitely takes much more coordination. The travelers have to have a lot of flexibility. Know that it might not be very, very, almost pretty sure it's not going to be a 2-week, 3-week, maybe it's a 4-week trip, 5-week trip by the time the consulates respond, because their business days of response have now become extended. And that's where a lot of the problem comes from.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. So keep going, because it's coffee talk. I have to.
Oh no, let's go back. We were just talking about the H's with regard to the economic ban. So there's to sunset December 31st.
And the L's
and the L's, the H, and the immigrant visas, which was a huge. Probably one of the largest effects was the limitation of issuing immigrant visas. So you had a lot of family-based folks who couldn't come in at all. What that did is it allocated the numbers for family-based to the employment-based. It's in the regulation that if it goes from one year to the next, you can move the numbers over. So that was pretty large. So what will happen is if that is still in place, if it's extended by Trump, if it's not, then it just dies on its own. Or what will he do with it? What logical basis does he have for restricting certain L's? When L's or E's, they bring in, well, E's aren't blocked, but when L's bring in business, they're new startups. They're continuing business.
From what I've seen with the Trump administration and these, the April and June proclamations, I think we're likely to see those extend till probably January. I mean, I would be surprised if those were allowed to sunset on the 31st as planned. I think that the Trump administration and its, lame duck time period will likely keep those in place until, an inauguration would be my prediction.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. So that's the other thing is what can he do in 11 weeks? It's a lot he can do in Trump years. There's a lot. We're expecting he's going to leave as much as he can in place. Some of them may have a nexus to reality. Some might not.
Well, it seems that clearly Biden is very interested in, as you know, every sovereign defines itself in many respects through its immigration policies and its citizenship laws. So the United States is no exception through itself as a sovereign, how they do that, and how they believe in how they handle asylees and refugees, just like other sovereigns struggle with the same idea. So I think you're going to see some movement in DACA, detention of children. That will, immigration, as much as we're all in immigration and our foreign nationals are very concerned about their time period here, immigration is not just business immigration. It is asylees, it is DACA, it is detention, it is refugees, it is border control, it is a lot of things that we don't always bring up and focus on for this.
Right.
So I think that is also one of the pivotal points of change that I don't think the wall is going to be opened up, but I don't think we're going to see such rhetoric of governing that tensions with our neighbors that way.
Yeah, I mean, DACA was one of Biden's projects with the Obama administration, so he will definitely seek to put it back on track, reverse the rescission, and set a path for them for a green card. Well, they call it citizenship, but you have to get to the green card first. so that's probably something on his list as well. DACA, TPS. We're looking at TPS.
And I think Biden's kind of path on DACA is a little bit more straightforward in the sense that, what we have in place is the court order to return the program to its, status before the Trump administration moved to terminate DACA. And then instead of doing that, what the Trump administration did was pass this July 28th memo that kind of rescinded and replaced the program with shorter renewal timeframes, with constraints on advanced parole, and other ways to kind of narrow, not accepting any new applicants. But that was all done through policy memorandum by DHS leadership. And so I think because we have kind of less of a regulatory, I think because there's less of a regulatory barrier, for lack of a better word, there with the DACA program specifically, I think that is certainly one area where a President-elect Biden could act swiftly and change would happen swiftly.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's in Todd's list. It's one of the important projects he has, for sure, for sure.
I mean, I think in getting back to TPS, it's very important just for a second to just point out that's very important for, we have a lot of food supply industries and we have a lot of, bakeries, and who makes the bread and who makes the yogurt and who makes the grain and who makes the yeast and who makes all these supply chains. And we also have, they feed into bigger organizations. And so TPS is really important because there are a lot of these manufacturing areas and food supply areas really do rely on a legal staff of TPS over the many years TPS has been there. So, I mean, one could make the argument that the government either has to act sooner, but when you have someone here for 15 years, their whole family, they got to figure this out because, I mean, some of them are eligible for pensions at their company. That's how long they've been here. So I think that, which leads us to a question I have for both of you. The backlog. Oof, how are they going to divide up those resources, do you think, Biden? There is an absolute backlog. And as we all know, with the increased fees, Department of Homeland Security is facing a budget crisis once again. So how are they going to allocate those resources and where? I think will be interesting for people who want to move things along here.
I mean, I think a lot of their resources have also been consumed just by the informal directives they've gotten, increased denials, RFEs, delays with a lot of things, just putting it, naturalization. Naturalization has never taken this long. With all their leaving, I think they were leaving space for a lot of proposals to come in and biting some time. So I think they could probably do a little bit more efficiently without so many unpublished directives that we know they've gotten. But definitely they are going to have to revisit probably the fee increase. Maybe not in what we saw that's enjoined. That's not yet. Premium processing has, but that's not the other fees. The increases, some of them were a little astronomical, especially when you look at naturalization. So I think I don't think we're going to, I think there's going to be changes, not all of them necessarily are things we're going to like, but some, there might not be a choice to them.
Well, I know, the premium processing increase was, something that was championed by Democrats and Republicans in Congress to both, and that was kind of their solution to help mitigate some of the USCIS fiscal challenges that agency has experienced this year. But I'm not clear. I haven't, and to be fair, the visa bulletin is sometimes a different language to me. But it's kind of yet to be seen still, right? How many, family-based green cards could potentially transition or kind of roll over to a employment-based, green card availability, right? And please correct me if I'm just speaking out of hand.
So are you asking how the family numbers moved into employment or mute? Oh, you're on mute, Genevieve.
I am so sorry about that.
That's okay.
I
We were
promised
trying
myself
to
I
read
wouldn't
lips.
make that mistake.
I think some of the participants were reading it. They probably knew what you were going. Marcel, do you want to explain what the visa bulletin is? Or
okay, so the visa bulletin, and I think what you're saying is so we have the visa bulletin tells us what's the order, the queue. There's limited numbers of visas that can be given per categories.
Or lawful permanent residency.
Right.
For green cards.
For green cards. They separate the family and the employment. And we've always seen it as one bulletin. Now what we have is USCIS making a determination which of the two, now there's two charts, filing date, final action dates, which one we can use. So that's the one that we've been monitoring. We had a huge rush in October to file because a lot of numbers became current for filing dates, not final action dates. Final action dates is you can get the green card right away. Filing actions, you can file for your green card and wait. We were expecting.
Oh, and I just want to clarify, right away in immigration terms, as opposed to New York terms.
So, right away will be a year or two.
Yeah.
But at least they're in the queue. Like I see that the end's in sight around the corner. So we expected them to retrogress significantly. They didn't for November, fortunately, but they did something they've never done. They released that visa bulletin so close to the wire that had they retrogressed, they wouldn't get opportunities for anybody to take immediate action. So they released the visa bulletin very late. I don't hope that's not going to be a pattern they start exercising, but I didn't think there was a shift with the numbers. I think it didn't retrogress or didn't move. The dates kind of stayed, a lot of them where they were. And I think a lot has to do with the immigrant visas not being used. The ban on the immigrant visas is huge. A lot of folks didn't get their visas and families separated because it really affected family. Employment had a workaround. They can adjust here as long as they have a visa here.
Just as to the green card, I just want to bring this up since we're on the topic of green cards, and we'll go back to the L's, but and the and the bans and the travel bans. But just to bring that up, one of the bans did not allow for green card if you were processing at the U.S. consulate as opposed to being here in the United States and filing for your green card. What do you think will happen? Will they start allowing the families to go forward even though they're outside the United States?
No, I don't think it's going to be an immediate. I don't think out of the bans, the one I think that will be the first to go would be what we call, it's not a Muslim ban because after its various iterations, it threw in Venezuela and North Korea.
See?
to kind of survive. So I think one of the first that we'll see an immediate effect will be what we call the Muslim ban. The other ones with travel, with family-based, I don't think it's going to be, there's a lot for him to go through and he has to prioritize and pick and choose where the priorities lie. And that probably won't be it. That he has to see where COVID's going. he still needs to get a lot of feedback in terms of data with COVID. So that's something that's going to continue until when, we don't know. Maybe summer. That's left to be seen.
I agree with that. What do you think, Genevieve?
No, I do. I agree as well. I think that the Biden administration the transition team plan on their campaign site was pretty clear about their first 100 days in office, and the Muslim ban is at the top of that list. And then we see a lot of changes in asylum processes and procedures that kind of top that list. So I think when we're looking at the travel ban section of immigration, that's really going to be the president-elect's priority in those first 100 days.
Yeah, and then asylum, right? Which he's doing at the border with the families and all of these, how he's changed the asylum process. Just by it's incredible. I mean it's virtually ground to a halt. Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean essentially you come in through Mexico. Not if you're Mexican, but you come in through Mexico, you can't, even if they let you in, you can still be blocked because you're not supposed to apply for asylum if you've traveled through Mexico. Well, a lot of these folks have no other way to travel. Correct. You can't get on a plane.
So now, and I just want to address this now that we're talking about, Biden's 100 days, president-elect. If, the public charge has always been a very interesting part of our immigration history. And now there is a public charge, now that we're talking about this, which for those who don't know, for those who are getting a green card, even if you make $1 million, it is about 15 pages long. And it asks a lot of questions, like a year's worth of bank statements, your taxes, your, health, insurance, property you own, your assets, your liabilities, your credit history, your credit score. It's a lot of information for people who are like, I make $900,000. Well, it's for everyone. Apparently, you could be a public charge. I would like to join you in your public charge, but I want to be part of your household. But that said, where are we going with this public charge, especially when people apply for a green card? Where do you think President-elect will be going with this?
I'm curious to see, because the public charge rule there's been so much back and forth in the courts that, and it has such a kind of a storied history. Even just in the last week and a half, we saw a federal district court stay the rule, and then immediately the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, reversed that decision. And I think, what I find, I write for Bloomberg Law, so what I find interesting from a legal perspective is, the Seventh Circuit has already ruled on the public charge rule once, and now it seems to be going there again. And I think there's a somewhat general consensus that the Supreme Court might rule on the public charge rule, which would, again, I believe, be a second round for the High Court. But what is really interesting is now with the new Justice Barrett, she was part of the Seventh Circuit's decision in that first round. So she would be expected to recuse herself from any next round of consideration for the public charge rule. And as we know, when it comes to an administration change, places where a Biden-elect administration could choose to no longer defend the public charge rule, that would really be determined more so by the judge and the court and the parties involved. It's not the most straightforward kind of reversal of policy if that was what they wanted to do. So I think that particular regulation is like, it sees even more of a web of unwinding than some of the other regulations that the Trump administration has. has put in
I
place.
think that's a lot of his path is going to be that. Some of it's going to be through action, and the other part is going to be through sit and wait and non-action in terms of injunctions, because there's been so many in this administration. But this particular 944 one is the one I call the yo-yo regulation. It's up, it's down, it's in, it's out. I feel bad because we're telling our clients it's out. No, it's in. No, it's out. and it's insane. We were preparing for October. The amount of documentation was almost feels like such a violation of. Look, we already have a public charge ground for inadmissibility. This is just another addition to the one we already have. We already have one. They're already viewed for a possibility or potential becoming inadmissible because they're going to become a public charge. The problem with this one is that it gives them so much more subjective, kind of clouded in objectivity, but it really gives these officers more subjective to say, I think you could become one. Even if you make 200,000, I think you could become one maybe when you're, I don't know, 50, 60 years old. I don't know. It's really, it has to be, something has to be done and cleaned up on that front.
I want to go back just for a second. I know we have Q&As and you know, I want to welcome a lot of questions, but I want to go back to the travel bans with the L's and the E, well, with the L's and the H's and things like that. And I do want to go through the wage. With the travel ban, Marcella and Genevieve, I was hoping, well, I'm thinking, what do you think in light of the fact that we have the highest unemployment in U.S. history? What do you think is going to happen in terms of some of these work visas, especially those who want to come in from abroad to start their jobs on, if they got in the H-1B cap and they're approved and they're waiting outside and new L's and, you know, business moves. So I wonder if, Marcella, you could speak to it and Genevieve, you can speak to it as well. Go ahead, Marcella.
Okay. So in October, we saw the introduction of two interim regulations, which will, I mean, they already started to face challenges. The big one was the introduction of rephasing or readjusting the percentiles for OES wages, which, so you need them if you need them from perm, green cards, you need it for H-1Bs, anything that has a labor condition application for E3s. So they recategorized the percentiles. All the wages went up. It's all based on the same data, but for a lot of occupations, somehow the data is not there anymore. So we had tiered wages for a lot of occupations, and now they're just poof, they're gone. And we're going to alternative wages. So you have this one, you have that one, and then you also have the introduction of redefining specialty occupation, making sure that there has to be a direct relationship of your degree to the occupation. So the concept of accepting a various degrees for a position, it has to have very, very close, tight-knit relationship. And a lot of it, when you start reading what they're promulgating, they're coming from their request for evidence. They're kind of condensing them for you to address what they want to see, which would require really regulatory change, what they're doing.
And I'm curious, you know, we have the DOL rule that's already gone into effect, the Department of Labor rule that changes these wages, as Marcella. But then at the same time, we've also had a proposed regulation come out from the Department of Homeland Security that would redo how the H-1B lottery is performed so that it would be a wage-based selection process instead of the random lottery. And it seems as if like the combination of these two changes to the H-1B program, at least, might just erase, you know, what the program calls entry level jobs. You know, that tier 1 and tier 2 wage would essentially go away.
Exactly. And that
is where the majority, I think, of visas
where they sit, because you have a lot of you have most of them are our lottery cap is mostly what college students graduating to enter the industry. They've spent 4 years, 7 years, 8 years, whatever time they've in the U.S. getting an education, paying their international rates, and they apply for an H-1B. But every occupation has an entry level. Every occupation does. You don't just come in and sit at the president's desk. It doesn't happen. So, but what they're doing with the introduction of the lottery is they're trying to bring in this OES. So H's right now, we can do alternative wages, and we've been successful. We've done it. It works for now.
And just to bring in an alternative wage means, you know, if you're an F1 student coming in, for example, they impact that. The salary has gone up within the 75 percentile. So let's just say a lot. And so basically, if you are a journalist and you have a specified degree, and all of a sudden your entry level wage should be like 200,000.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'll take it.
So that's the other thing, like
I can
So
tell
it's
you
like,
that's not the current entry level wage for a journalist.
well, that's the occupations whose data has disappeared. There's no longer, they can't put the percentiles there anymore, or it's not available. You're okay using it as long as you offer, I think 209, 203,000. That's the entry level wage. So what they're doing with the lottery is they're bringing in where alternative wages work, but if you're subject to the lottery, it won't work anymore.
I see. Yeah.
So let's see where that goes. I can't even visualize how they're going to do it. I mean, you're going to have to disclose what their wages are in the lottery. We're going to have to put in more information in the lottery. They said if we meet the cap, then they'll look to the OES wage levels, prioritizing level 4 and level 3. If you use an alternative wage, they're gonna compare your alternative wage to the OES levels, which are always going to be under 1, essentially.
Right.
I'm just, we have only like 10 minutes, so I'm going to ask just some. I know it does, and that's the thing with Coffee Talk. We could spend just one day on just the L visa, you know, or just you know, and because it's so interesting, immigration. You know, there's a few questions out there. One of them is, do you believe a Biden administration can implement these changes? How quickly? Again, we think of immigration as, wow, that should be the first thing on your list. Right next to COVID. I mean, we really feel that way. I mean, you know, but the truth, sadly, is, you know, that's not going to happen. Immigration is never the first thing. I mean, I do think when they do move towards immigration, it's really, I mean, there are people who have spoken, like the American public, on detention of the children. Like that is a huge issue for this administration. For the new administration, just like it was with the last administration. I mean, the American public has shown a very, very, they don't want children detained, you know? I mean, so I think that'll be the first step. So when it comes to work visas, we'll get there.
Yeah.
The rep be there. So I think they're moving towards a more, you know, we know who President-elect is because, you know, he was the VP under Obama for 2 terms. So we do have an idea of where he's going, do you know?
Right.
And then there's some other questions, Marcella, do you want to take them or?
I was just looking to see what other questions we might have. But definitely the one on the children, I think that's going to be, I mean, these children have been held, there's 545, I think was the last count, right? That they haven't been able to match. They've gone against the agreements and settlements they've had with the Floridas to not detain children indefinitely, and they have. There are certain conditions they're supposed to be in, and they're not. It's the most heart-wrenching part of of all these changes, and I don't know. It's even hard to talk about. It's terrible.
A lot of people are wondering, you know, do I get my visa abroad? What do I do? You know, obviously, if you're in the United States, we don't know where COVID's going, you know, so also, are you subject to the quarantine? Are you not subject to the quarantine? You know, basically, you know, you do what you can. You file here. You hope there's an opening at the U.S. consulate that does not get canceled because you want to protect yourself and continue to work here. Although with COVID, there are a lot of people who just choose to work abroad, wait for an opening and be with their family wherever or whatever country they have. But you'd have to really look into what your personal situation is and realize that it's still a very fluid situation. I mean, even if they say Pfizer has come up with a solution or may have a vaccine, or I heard little headline this morning, that doesn't mean that, okay, CVS, you know, it's still going to take a while to come. And also they said they had some safety concerns that they haven't disclosed. I don't know if the participants have a second head. I don't know. You know, we just have to wait and see what that all means. Go ahead.
Actually,
Sorry.
I'm just going through a question, and there was one of the changes that also happened with the administration is there was reciprocity changes on visas, on how long the visas are valid for. How long the E2s, a lot of E2s were reduced for various countries, validities for Ls. So the reciprocity schedule is something that's kind of done, it's reciprocal, depending on, we treat you as you treat us. That's the way the kind of call it tit for tat, but it's reciprocity is what it is. So will that necessarily change? I don't think so. It's something that gets revisited often. So it is something that actually, if you even go on SAN's website and you look up reciprocity, you'll see how often it changes. It's just not always broadly announced, but it changes all the time. Reciprocity changes are one of the things that always come through. We just don't always announce. It's not always announced so publicly, but it's constantly in flux. But with regard to renewing your visas, so here we have one that's needed in April, recommending or waiting to apply for under Biden's administration. I don't think it's going to make a difference whether you delay it or not. The only thing that will have a difference is the travel ban. What country you're going to, where you're applying, Schengen country, coming back, you're subject to the travel ban. And if you're subject to the COVID travel ban and you need a national interest exemption, make sure you can stay comfortably in country for, we don't know how many weeks. It could be 4 or 5 weeks. We even saw one country that was posting a 60-day response time on a national interest exemption. That's the longest one we've seen. And that's a bit insane,
Yeah.
but that's what it is.
And also just right really quickly, when people have an unexpired visa in their passport, they travel abroad, they travel back. Just to be clear, you just look to see if you're coming back from a travel ban country and if you have to quarantine. So, some people, they're not from travel ban countries and they have an unexpired visa. They just have to check to make sure that, nothing's changed, and also look to the country you're going to. We have Australians who are not part of the travel ban, but in Australia, when you go back, you have to be quarantined for 14 days. And that includes, hotels won't even bring you a FedEx. So if you're expecting some documents that you need, you have to time this.
Right, and keep in mind, if you can't get a national insurance exemption, the easiest workaround is you stay in another country for 14 days. It's easier said than done.
If you're subject to the quarantine.
If you're subject to the COVID travel ban, if you're from the Schengen countries, UK, Ireland, easier said than done. 14 days is a lot. It comes with a cost, but that's the backup plan.
Right. And getting a visa doesn't mean you get to waltz back into the U.S. It depends, it depends. If you're coming from a travel ban country, there are exemptions. If you have a U.S. family, you have a U.S. kid, people bring Junior with them. They're like, hello, Junior, look, you're traveling. Yay.
It's really the pandemic of it all. I mean, that's the takeaway, like from a, journalists right now are really having to learn that we can't predict things or even cover policy and regulatory changes in the same way that we always have, because things are changing so quickly that every time we go to write a story, it's almost like something different by the time of publication. And that's going to be the top level when we talk about potential immigration changes, is that there's so many other competing interests or competing needs across the spectrum. So just pay attention to those COVID numbers. It's really,
I really want to be able to tell you guys that we have 2 minutes left, and I think everyone probably wants to take the opportunity to thank our participants for being here today, especially our really impressive guests, Marcela Bermudez and Genevieve Douglas. Very impressive. I'm very happy that you guys were able to be with us today. We really appreciate it. And I just, I'm sure you guys want to be able to say goodbye as well in the last 30 seconds. So go ahead, Genevieve and Marcela.
I just wanted to thank you both so much for having me. This was, journalists always, we ask a lot of questions. We don't have to answer a lot of questions, and turning this on the other foot is fun, and just something I don't get to do a lot of, and so I really appreciate the opportunity, and I've so enjoyed chatting with you both. It's been wonderful.
Well, you brought a lot of good point of view to our participants, Marcela.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us again, and we enjoy being able to do this and kind of go. This was a really all of them have been enjoyable, but this one was really a good one to prep for. I know one of the questions was what are our foreign nationals thinking with the administration change? Nothing is magical. It's not going to be anything that's going to be overnight. There's a lot of with every presidency and every transition. There's going to be some things that happen quicker than others. Not everything has to be changed. There's a foundation for some of them, but I guess what's comforting is there's some of the policies that have been the most hurtful ones are the ones that we're concerned about. The border with the children is huge, and the bans might be needed, but revisions were necessary as well, right? So step by step, we'll get there.
Thank you all very, very much. We really appreciate everyone coming, and we hope to do this again. Coffee Talk every 8 to 9 weeks. The next one will be more in depth on travel bans, and I hope that you can join us again, Genevieve. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, of course. Goodbye.